Welcome to Concept to Creation, a podcast featuring entrepreneurs who share their business journey. We'll hear what motivated them to turn their dreams into a business. They'll share stories from the trenches of business, from raising capital, creating products or services, navigating regulations, hiring employees, and managing competition and growth. We'll discover their successes and failures, and they'll provide advice for budding entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host and fellow entrepreneur, Mike Conrad.
Welcome back to another episode of the Concept to Creation podcast. I'm glad you're with me today. Terry Munson, my guest, is the founder and president of Foresite Incorporated. He founded Foresite way back in 1992, ironically the same year I started my business. Then Foresite was known as CSL, Contamination Studies Laboratories. Terry has extensive experience with how cleanliness issues are affecting product reliability for electronic hardware. He is the primary developer of ion chromatography analysis for use in the electronic manufacturing industry, and is an active member, I should say a very active member of IPC. Terry's insights have been seen in various industry trade publications as well as at many technical conferences. It can be said that Terry marches in front of the band using his unique experience in cleanliness testing methods, many of which have made their way into internationally recognized standards. Terry has been quoted saying, "Everything is fixable, you just have to understand what's causing the problem." So today we're going to attempt to understand Terry as he joins me as my guest on this Concept to Creation podcast. Welcome, Terry. Glad you're with me today.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So you and I started our businesses in the same year. What month did you start?
April 1st.
You beat me. Okay, I started in August. April 1st, that's an ominous day to start your business, right?
It was one of those, option out clauses. If it failed, I could just say, April Fool's Day. So
There you go. And I'm wondering if at any time during your business journey, was there a time when you felt foolish, like for starting it? Or did you always have confidence that it would be successful?
No, I saw the need and that the opportunity was always there and no one was servicing it. So I felt like, all I had to do was listen to the engineers who had the problems and learn what they needed to make them successful.
Excellent. So let's start at the beginning, maybe even before the beginning. What were you doing before CSL, as Foresight was known then?
Mm-hmm. I worked at Delco Electronics for 5 years, doing what I'm doing now, basically learning about manufacturing processes, applying ion chromatography to both the fabrication and assembly processes, and then working through what does the data really mean? Where's good and bad? Where are the problems? And we were still in the days of rosin fluxes and Freon and 1,1 and trichloroethane. So, from an assembly standpoint, I learned a lot about what we did. And I was blessed to spend those 5 years at Delco learning about assembly and fabrication and running the plating lines and just getting, deep into each of the processes that we still did in-house.
Yeah, interesting. And then from Delco, you started CSL, or yeah.
Yep.
So there's one point when you walk away from a perfectly good job, from a steady paycheck, and then you jump into the deep end of the pool. It's been described as the deep end of the cold pool. Did you plan that for some time? Was there just a spark that said I need to do this? How calculated was that move?
It was fairly calculated. I spent a year networking within the IPC, going to committee meetings, talking to people that I had met, other technical leaders in the industry, and gauging the response. If I started a lab, would you guys use us? So it was kind of feeling the industry out. Would they feel that they needed that new level of understanding? And I got a great response. I got a lot of people saying, yeah, we'd be happy to. And Honeywell was my 8th client in the study, and Boeing was number 3. And so, yeah, having a network of great companies to kind of start with really helped the emotion behind setting up and running the business. Planning, it was, I needed an ion chromatograph. I needed to have some things, and I networked with the manufacturers to say, okay, what can we do at a very low cost, and how can we put technology that I couldn't take from Delco. I published what we were doing, in the technical papers, had the approval from the legal side to talk about what we were doing. But when I left, I couldn't take anything with me. So no limits, no techniques, no understanding of what the approach was. So it was go back and start from scratch. And I was able to get Dionix at the time to loan me some equipment and say, here's some stuff, play with it for a little while, and then we'll see what happens.
And Dionix is the manufacturer of ion chromatography equipment,
correct.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Which isn't cheap.
So,
those things are six figures, somewhere six figures, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, with a very small system and a very, very focused approach, I was able to pull together the right tools. I found a couple auctions that I could buy some lab equipment from that it was pennies on a dollar. So it worked out really well. I drove to Chicago and brought back stuff in a big trailer after a big auction. So it gave me the foundation to what we were doing. I rented a building, leased a building for a 3-year period, and they gave us, I could work it out, so I had no rent the first year. So I was able to network and negotiate a number of things. And that April 1st opening, I had 3 staff members. And I said, I can't pay you. We were going to do this as a little exercise and see if it works. And, I have 2 of those people still left. One is retired and one still works for me. So it was a good beginning, and everyone chipped in and worked hard, and it felt like an opportunity that everyone saw that the handwriting on the wall meant, let's go make some money and help solve problems.
And you had, I would imagine you were on a mission, a timed mission, because 12 months from April 1st, you had to start, 12 months from April 1st, things got real, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, rent's not free anymore. I'm sure the equipment company probably didn't intend to give you a machine forever, right? They somehow expected a return on that. So you had a runway, and
we spent a lot of time negotiating with clients because we didn't know how to charge. That was the biggest concern, was how do you charge for what we do? And we kind of followed some of the other labs' analytical models early on, where you charged $100 per sample that you ran through the IC. Well, we found out very quickly that didn't go very far, and that it didn't cover the analytical work as well as the engineering work behind interpreting all the data, writing the report, doing all the things that we needed to do. So within that first 6 months, we figured out how to charge, how to pay attention to what the client really needed versus, what we wanted to sell them. Because there's always 2 different things that go on there. But paying attention to what they need, understanding what the residue issues were at the time, and then focusing on, okay, let's put together a quality document that they could share with their management and their suppliers. So that was where we found that really focused approach at getting good reports into the customer's hands.
When we started our company, you talk about how do you set your prices. When I first started my company, I left a similar company, right, and started my own, but I didn't know how to set my prices. And what I ended up doing is I did a real quick survey of what all of our competitors were charging, and I figured, okay, I have a strategic decision. I can either go lower or I can go higher. If I go lower, no doubt the competition will go lower still, and then I will go lower still, and it's a race to the bottom. So I decided, okay, they're probably not going to go higher. So I just made sure that we were a few $100s higher than everybody. And figure if we're going to lose on the price, we're going to lose on the price. It's that fail fast concept.
Exactly.
It's like we're going to fail fast if we're going to lose on price. And we don't want customers that our only price concern. We want we want partners. So we went high, and that is, that was scary because I had a lot of self-doubt. I didn't have the confidence that the stuff we made was any good, and I certainly didn't have the confidence other people would think it was very good. And but what do you do, right? So you have to go one way or the other. And I'm reminded that in the Great Recession of 2008, as it's now referred to, in the retail world, the retail world was decimated, but there was a handful of segments that did well, and they were all the high-end segments. The Nordstrom, the Saks Fifth Avenues, they kept selling clothes. The Targets and the JCPenney and the Macy's all tanked. Well, actually, Targets and Walmart's did okay. So either the very high or the very low were successful. Most of us can't afford to be that low because we can't invest billions into the infrastructure to be able to run 5% profit margins. So everyone likes to be in the middle because it's safe, and everyone's afraid to go high. But anyway, that was an experience that I had.
Yeah, and we had something similar because we weren't selling a product. We had to define, what we were selling, and it was the report, the education, the support for the engineer who had the problem and had to explain it to his management, what they needed to do to identify the problem, and then what they needed to do for corrective action. So we worked through all of these other secondary issues, but realized that our report is our ability to go in and educate the client, give them the information in a way, and spend time looking at, okay, what are the right images that we need? And that's where I really started spending more money, was in, microscopes and cameras and looking at the effect of what we could see. Buying my first scanning electron microscope was a terrifying event. And it was used and refurbed. So it was going through all those elements. It's understanding what the customer needs. 90% of it, from my perspective, is being able to see what the real problem is and then understanding how to correlate that data to that information.
You had a choice between a second house or a scanning electron microscope, right?
Exactly.
And you chose the latter. So how did it, I understand when you started, you had a year of free rent. You had some employees who were willing to,
go without pay.
Sweat equity kind of thing, or at least sweat return on investment. Where'd you get your startup capital? There's still a need for, you still have to pay electricity bill. I don't think the electric company's going to go, I'll give you a year for free, right? So
no, I basically had saved and put back about $15,000, and we were able to start working and basically using that $15,000. And then I took some of that money and met with some small-time investors that I knew, people that would say, okay, and they gave another $15,000. So we had some early startup capital, but it was only $30,000 to start this ball rolling down the hill. And I lived on credit cards for that first year. My wife was great at being able to juggle and manipulate the funds, and we just kept it clean and simple, and it worked.
And did your wife work also during that time, like somewhere else?
She was staying home with 3 kids. So she did not work. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
well, she worked. She worked hard, but just not.
She worked very hard. Yes. She didn't get paid.
Get that exactly. Exactly.
But yeah. So we were very blessed. That's all I can say.
Okay. So you were blessed with some investment money, with some savings, with some free rent, with some generous equipment. People with some generous employees. Those were the blessings in your first few years. What were the challenges? Beyond all those blessings, clearly there were challenges. You don't have to put them in alphabetical order,
Sure.
Dewey Decimal System, but just what are some of the basic challenges that you experienced, particularly in those early days?
In the early days, documenting the procedures, getting the process down that we knew, but taking time and documenting, okay, here's how we're going to do the extraction. Here's how we're going to label the samples. Here's how we're going to identify the matrix as it's going through the auto sampler. All of those things were critical. But I think the biggest challenge was figuring out how to start doing the sales and talking to clients and letting them know we were available. There was some very minimal marketing, but it was just cold calling clients that I knew from my IPC platform and saying, hey, we're available. If you have a problem, give us a call. Let's talk about it. And we just had a great response. So the biggest challenge was getting over the fear of making that cold call, dealing with how do you communicate what we're doing. So the thing I found the most effective was writing papers. So we started writing papers very early on and just talking about the problem and the way we were addressing it and what the outcome was.
You strike me as a very confident person. Your personality, it kind of exudes confidence. You may not agree with that, but that's the way I take it, and I'm sure many others. And to start a business, you have to be a little nuts and a little confident, right? I mean, there has to be some ego at play. There has to be, all of that. And was there ever a point in your business where your confidence was shaken, where even your ego, your passion, your experience at Delco and other experiences, just, that wasn't enough? Were the challenges in business bigger than your ego and confidence and passion had been previously?
In the sales side, working through, I know I have good projects this month. Who's going to have a major failure next month was something that just constantly just gnawed at my innards, and it just shook me to the core. And by doing it every month and understanding that, okay, this month it's an automotive client who's got a big problem. Next month it's going to be a telecom guy that's going to have a problem. The next month it's a medical client that's got a problem. It's relying on these customers that find out about us and that we work with and solve problems that keep coming back. And that's the thing that really blew me away, which was we would solve problems. Engineers would take our information, leave one company, they'd go to another company and then call us because, hey, we have the same problem. But just having that fear, we're not going to have any more problems to deal with, was something that took me a long time to get past.
I remember that feeling. We're in a similar business. We make machines that try and put you out of business.
Right. I like that.
I know. And the flux companies make products that are trying to put all of us out of business. But we make, for the audience who thinks we're competitors, we're not. We're actually allies. We make cleaning equipment. You do forensic analysis on failure mechanisms, usually due to contamination. So in my world, I used to think that at some point, someone's going to invent a flux that truly, under any condition, never needs to be cleaned. We came close to that. Or electronics are going to go with a solderless, maybe conductive adhesive, which our industry has played with, which will totally eliminate the need for any cleaning, which will prevent any contamination-related failure mechanisms, and both of us would be, greeters at Walmart, right? That would be our plan B,
exactly.
Right? Because there basically is no plan B. So, and then I realized after 29 years, at least in my case, 29 years in your case, in your case, people still make mistakes. People still have process problems that are bigger than them, and there's an increasing supply of those, and boards have gotten so small and miniaturized that even a fraction of the contamination compared to 29 years ago is enough to cause a board to fail. So I think there's plenty of business for both of us for the foreseeable future. Was there a time though, other than laying in bed wondering if that's the last problem with last customer with a problem you'll ever have, was there ever a time when you came so close to the edge when you went, this is it, or you can't see a way out of it? And then, of course, obviously you're still here, so we know how the story ends. But was there ever a time when you really thought you were in peril? No. We've been extremely
fortunate that we haven't hit that hard wall. The 2008 recession was some of our best growth because all these big companies were shutting down their labs, but they still needed the analysis and they still needed to be able to solve problems and ship product. So we got more and more work from especially the automotive and medical guys.
Right.
So,
well, you're an outsource supplier, so an outsourced supplier. So obviously, that makes perfect sense. And I would imagine also not just the recession, but the atrophy in our business, the people who are leaving and not being replaced, the sages, the subject matter experts that are leaving companies, not being replaced by an equal.
right.
I find a lot of, for better or for worse, in many cases it's for worse, but I find a lot of OEMs now are now reaching out to their vendors for technical information, not subject matter experts that are unbiased, right? So they're coming to, they're just going out to the people who can make money selling them things based on their answers, basically a very biased group of people to give them advice. And that's, that advice might be perfect advice. It might be less perfect advice, but they're definitely outsourcing. And
right. Well, they've outsourced. In what my perspective is, the OEMs have outsourced so much of what real manufacturing issues are that they don't have the technical expertise anymore to understand what the potential problems are. But these contract manufacturers and the subcontract manufacturers have very limited funds to have process experts in. So it kind of becomes a Lego building process. I'm going to put a red Lego here and a blue Lego here, and it's going to stick. And if I have a problem, I'll go to the Lego manufacturer and say, what happened? And there's very few of those people left. And it's to the point now where the OEMs, the CMs, the fabricators, we have a lot of discussions anymore, and they're surprised to say, well, this didn't outgas in this accepted and proven qualified process, but it outgassed and failed over here. Why? Well, because what historically worked over here wasn't in a semi-sealed or a sealed system, and you didn't realize that you had secondary cure mechanisms, and now I've got formic acid forming due to a staking compound in a sealed system that worked fine in an open system. So it's not understanding those variables.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So here's a question for you. It's kind of a morbid question, but I know based on your experience, you can handle this. So you worked back from 1985 to 1988 at Duke Memorial Hospital, and one of your positions there was you worked as a lab technician, and you did autopsy investigations. So your work really hasn't changed that much, except I mean, sometimes you are looking at organic contamination, but you're looking at both now, organic and inorganic. Back then it was mostly organic. But it's hard to believe that your past experience in autopsy investigations hasn't helped you in some way in your current role in investigating the cause of death of a electronic assembly. So how did that how did that training, how did not so much the biology, but the methodology of autopsy investigations help you in your mindset for failure analysis investigations?
What we were trained when we were doing the work for the pathologist was we would compartmentalize each of the key organs and break them down and then lay them out so that the pathologist could come through and take a deeper look at each of the samples and each of the areas we were looking at. We would section the heart into multiple sections, and we would look at key things in the valves. We would look at the key things in the septum, and we would spend time with each of these areas. So it allowed me to take that same mindset of compartmentalizing. And when we get a failure in, the first thing we do is we create an autopsy area. We have and we just disassemble everything, document everything, label everything, put it in a structure that's very similar to that of an autopsy table.
So your company is a service company of last resort for many people, right? Yeah. They wait until something breaks, they can't figure out the cause of it, and they go, fine, call Terry, right? So how do you go about, or have you gone about, attempting a transition from being a company of last resort or a service of last resort to more of a preemptive service? Has that been a a strategy? Is that a successful, a failed strategy? What's the status of that?
The status is it's ongoing, and we've been very successful with some of our key clients. We solve a problem, make the engineer look good. He gets promoted. He moves up the food chain, and in many cases, he remembers us. He brings us back in to deal with more problems. But we've been educating and spending more time in the educational platform and teaching these engineers and their younger engineers about their own processes. So we've had a number of clients bringing us back in as a education side of things to walk the process, to qualify new processes and look at the effects of how their minor changes are impacting their long-term reliability. And so it's been a kind of a blessing of both. We work with clients enough to create a foundation where the understanding of their current process is, and then we start moving them forward to say, okay, here's where you need to move things to affect the reality of change. So yeah, it's been a kind of a combination of fighting fires, dealing with the big failures, and then working with clients that we have one large medical manufacturer that we've done over 830 projects for in just a 5-year period that we've been working with them. So it's helping them deal with process and having the C3 where we're doing localized extraction and process control, and there's over 400 of these units in the field. We can deal with the process monitoring aspect, so we can work with the supply chain, deal with the effects, and then work through where we want to take that technology and deal with the optimization of the process. So yeah, it's an ongoing challenge though.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Cleaning in general, not to get too specific, technically specific on this show, which is more about business than the technical side, but just to lay out the kind of the ground rules in our industry, cleaning is a last resort. People are cleaning something that says no clean on the jar, right? Almost like don't clean, like an instruction manual. And so, cleaning is one of those things that doesn't have to happen. It's optional, but it adds reliability. But people don't want to spend the money unless they know there's a problem. They basically take the path of least resistance. And if the path of least resistance is to hire you or buy my equipment, then they'll do it. But they don't want to do it in any other for any other reason. So many times when entrepreneurs start a company, they're blessed with a level of ignorance. I certainly was blessed with a level of ignorance. I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's probably what allowed me to start the company, right? I didn't know how difficult it would be. I didn't know how close to the edge we would come. I didn't know the sleepless nights that were in front of me. Was there anything in your business experience that you didn't expect when you made that decision to walk away from a perfectly good paying job and dive into the cold, deep end of the pool?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, was the scale and the scope of the problem that I was walking into. The industry didn't have good tools to say, okay, here's where the reliability elements really rely. They didn't understand where the critical parameters were with the current process of rosin fluxes and solvent cleaning. And when we made the transition to no cleans and water soluble fluxes, we didn't understand some of those changes. And then now that we went to from leaded to lead free, we didn't understand those elements. And then now we're making things in a smaller package. But one of the biggest things is we've gotten rid of redundancy, and we've taken the circuit sensitivity to a much greater scale. So now any residue that you have in a critical area with a porous solder mask can be a problem for that functional circuit. So to me, it was the scale of the problem that I did not realize was good. Because I figured at 5 years, we deal with these circuit board cleanliness issues. The IPC would take care of it. We'd put some specs in place. We'd put some numbers out there, and we'd have the industry moving that direction. And I'd go work on plating. I was focused on dealing with plating issues and wafer fab issues. I wasn't even thinking that circuit board reliability and solder quality, reliability, and mechanical structure were going to even be part of what we were doing. I was content to have a small, 3 to 5 man lab and deal with what we dealt with. But here it is 29 years later, I've got 20 people here and I've got 21 people on staff and there's a lot more work than what we can really handle.
Interesting. Here you thought that you could solve the electronics problem with a few years of education and analysis, and the problem grew bigger, right?
Yes.
Not due to lack of effort on your part, just due to this exponential decrease in spaces between components, and just a perfect storm of higher reflow temperatures, smaller real estate, finer pitch, all these things, faster clock speeds, all these things. Internet of Things, which is taking electronics that have no business being in what they're in and putting them in it and sending them out to the cold, cruel world and harsh environments and all that stuff. We're going to be busy for a long time.
Yes. Well, my kids are going to be even busier. So that's where we want to take it, is that I'm giving them, because I've got 3 children who work for me and really going to take over. So they've got a long future ahead of them.
That's interesting. I've talked to a couple entrepreneurs on the show whose kids, ran far away. They have no interest in being in the business. In fact, but the irony is they took it over from their father, right? Yeah. So, but their kids, somehow the chain broke. If you're in the board fabrication business, if you're a kid whose father or mother owned a board fabrication business, you grew up drilling holes in boards. That's kind of your rite of passage, right? What are your children's rite of passage in the business? Are they sweeping floors? Are they doing investigations?
Cleaning circuit boards. No, they clean circuit boards. Yeah, that was when they turned 15 years old, they came in, and because I was telling people their circuit boards were dirty, and most fabricators or contract manufacturers didn't have a solution, and they didn't understand how good DI water worked and how good saponifier worked. And so I bought used inline cleaners, modified them, took them to a low pressure, high flood process, and we would contract clean. And we have a division where we just do contract cleaning, and I'm part of a number of manufacturers' processes because they don't want to invest the money into the equipment and deal with the waste and the water quality and the development of their own DI water system. So our kids cleaned and processed boards and swept floors and just kept things moving around here.
Interesting. There was a image coming up, a video coming up. I showed this already, so sorry for the redundancy, but there was someone cleaning a board there. Is that one of yours?
Yeah, that's whatever. No, that's not one of my sons. That's one of my employees. But he's My sons were at that time, they were learning how to cross section. So that's the other thing that my kids have become excellent at.
Now that is an art form.
Cross section.
You can't just can't read a book, a dummy's guide to cross sectioning and perform a successful cross section, right? Yeah. It's a combination of artwork, artistry, precision, and luck, needle in a haystack kind of luck, right?
It starts
depends
there.
What you're looking for. Yeah,
exactly. It starts there, and the thing that we found is that we eliminate any kind of power head or those types of automated tools and our hand processing. And we've developed some techniques that allow us we'll pot the parts in the circuit board before they're removed from the board and do things in a way that reduces the risk of damage when we take them apart. And a lot of people are surprised by that. And we're like, well, I don't want to add any more risk or contamination to the effect of the solder joint. So why wouldn't I protect it and isolate it first? But my kids have all learned that and are critical. And my daughter is my ISO management rep, and she's the business side of things. So she writes all my draft reports and does all those things. So she gets to see the other side of it.
So your exit strategy would be someday the kids give you a giant box of money and put you in an RV and wish you a good trip around the country, right? That's it.
That's what they want to do.
Excellent. That's wonderful. So one thing I was impressed when I watched some of your company videos is that you put a lot of emphasis on the, rather than putting emphasis on the specific technology, like we have this brand of machine that performs to this standard. You basically promote the benefits of your service as opposed to the technical side of the service. Is that by design? Is that, did you start off doing that, or did you realize that your audience had no comprehension of the specifics?
Absolutely. They have no comprehension of the technology. And I think that the industry has been so overwhelmed by, this type of technology or this type of technology. And they really want to get to the meat of what the problem is and how to address the problem. And we've found that to be the most effective way of communicating, our ability to help solve that problem.
Excellent. What's the difference between how you started running your business and how you run it today? What are one or two or three contrasts? Besides maybe sleep better and that you sleep better now, right?
Yeah. Well, I had more hair back then, so it started out with understanding that I couldn't do everything, and that came about midway. I worked on every single report, every single project. I would help break it down. I would help put it in the lab. We'd analyze the key areas. And I learned a very valuable lesson that if I didn't start sharing and teaching and educating and letting other people take on responsibility, that I wasn't going to have a functioning company at the end of this. And if I didn't give them the respect and the understanding of what we were trying to sell to the client, then I couldn't do that myself. So giving up some of the responsibilities has been the biggest challenge and the biggest transition that we've done probably in the last 10 years. So yeah, that's the big change, the big takeaway.
I would imagine when you first started your business, you spent 100% of your time working in your business, chief cook and bottle washer at the early days, right? How much from a percentage standpoint, 50-50, 80-20, whatever, how much time do you think you work on your business today versus in your business today?
I'd say we're probably 60-40.
60-40 on your business,
yeah.
40% in the trenches. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you see that going to a higher ratio over time, or do you think that your skills and your experience are still key in the business?
I think they're key in the business still, and it's because I have a unique ability. Some people call it a defect, but I see things in constructed 3 dimensions without taking them apart. I think through, see through. So I'm trying to teach them, okay, the first thing we do with anything that we get in-house, any circuit board, any system, is we just look at it. You document it, what you see what you know, and then you compare the things that are working to the things that aren't working. And we always try to get a good exemplar sample, but half the time we aren't able to get that. But it's just teaching people how to look at things in a way that allow them to understand how that system went together, where the fracture mechanics are.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your company specializes in delivering good news and bad news to people, right? And I would imagine a typical scenario is, hi, I'm Terry. The good news is we found the source of the problem. The bad news is you need to stop screwing up. Here's all the things in your process that are causing this problem, right? So it's a little bit of candy, a little bit of sledgehammer, right? Yeah. How have you balanced that fine art between delivering good news and bad news, and basically someone paid you for you to tell them how they're screwing things up, and then how do you balance that and knowing that you want them in the future if they have a similar need, so you don't want to alienate them?
Well, it starts with education about the architecture of the components. if you're looking for flux entrapment, say one of the most beautiful, cost-effective products that we deal with on a regular basis is a QFN, low standoff, bottom terminated, four-sided device that does a great job of trapping flux residues. And whether you clean it, whether you don't clean it, how high it is off the board, if you've got thermal vents, by educating them about the problems that system creates, we're able to give them good news about their failure because it's understandable. And that's what I found to be the most effective, is teach them that it's the process interaction issue and it's not somebody screwing up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just about every business suffers cash flow problems at one time or another. Did you experience in your history cash flow solutions, and how did you overcome that?
We learned how to sell receivables, and we learned to get receivables. We know that some automotive manufacturers are slower to pay. Instead of the 45 days that we like to have, or 90 days, they'll go 120 plus. And it's just having and that's one of the things I learned early on. I can't run the business side without good business people on my side. So I hired early on a full-time CPA. So having a CPA that will deal with all those issues constantly, just focus on talking to the right people within the organization and moving money to cover the things that we need to cover. And then finding the grant programs. And we've done a number of SBIR and SBA and MDA and DOD contracts. So working with those kind of programs and knowing you never get paid on time, with some of those things. So we've learned that working with our banks, having a good line of credit, being able to buy things, pay them off, that is the biggest success that we've had from a business standpoint, is working with the banking system. And they're constantly coming to us and say, okay, what do you need a loan for this year? And what can we project, and where can we, do you want to buy a scanning electron microscope, or do you want to buy a CT scan system? And it's like, no, not really, not right now. But, they keep coming back to us and going, what can we do to help you? So it's building that relationship with the banking system that has been just a huge blessing.
Yeah, I agree. The irony, as we talked about on the show before, the irony is, in order to get a line of credit from a bank, you have to prove you don't need it. And then the moment you actually can prove you need it, you don't qualify for it, right? It's that catch-22.
Yeah.
So your company, a big part of your company, I believe, is performing investigations, which are generally on site. So someone has a problem, you send the team out, and one or two people, and they crawl through their workspace, they look through their records, they look over people's shoulders, they figure out, in the lab, they do autopsies on failed parts, and they look for smoking guns. When COVID hit, when the global pandemic hit at the beginning of 2020, pretty much all that travel shut down. And even if you had a way to get there, most of the lobby doors were locked, right? And so how did you pivot from, clearly you're still in business, and you mentioned that the recession helped your business. I don't know if the pandemic did, or if there was plenty of business that you just couldn't do because you couldn't physically get on site. So what was your strategy? What is and was your strategy for the pandemic and the travel restrictions that were a result of it?
As soon as the restrictions came into play, we found that we were going to have to be creative. So where we needed to be on site and see processes, we got approval from manufacturers and from their management to do video links, to do FaceTime with iPhones and look at the process from that perspective. We would work with engineers that were comfortable with the process and talk through, okay, what did you do here? What did you do here? And how did this change occur? And we really were just deep diving with the communication side of things. We brought on one of our support staff is bilingual in Spanish. So we spent a lot of time working with the operators on the floors in some of our Mexico operations, and had him make sure that we were interpreting everything correctly and that he could communicate with them correctly. So a lot of Teams, a lot of Zoom, a lot of FaceTime, all of that became creative at seeing what's going on with the process.
Are you back in the field again?
Some. We've been to Mexico twice. I've sent Eric to Minnesota, but right now we're reducing some of our travel just because of the Delta variant issues. Eric's on his way up to Chicago tomorrow for the IPC SummerCon, but beyond that, we're still doing a lot of Zoom and a lot of Teams meetings.
Sure. So everyone has competition. What is your stance on competition? Not specifically, not
Sure.
mentioning names or anything. That doesn't really matter. But just in general, what's your stance on competition, and has that stance changed from the time you started your company to today?
When we first started, we knew that there were a lot of labs out there. I didn't realize a lot of labs, and part of the reason I founded my lab was I wanted to be more of an expert in the technology side of what we were doing, so we could use the technology as a tool to interpret the process effects. There was not a lot of competition there. Today, there's still not a lot of competition there. And I welcome competition. I welcome someone else to develop a localized extraction tool to compete with the C3, so we can actually get an IPC method that isn't just a single source supplier. Unfortunately, there's 27 other IPC test methods that have single source suppliers or equivalent. And so, it's having those kinds of opportunities to work with competition and to work with other labs to bring more knowledge to the industry. That's, to me, it's about education and understanding and ways of doing things that help predictable impact positively on the process and reliability.
For those of my audience who are not part of the electronic assembly industry, IPC, of course, is one of our 2 or 3 association type industry or industry associations, and IPC also is a standards-based organization. We create many of the standards, most of the standards that our industry uses, and in that context, changing IPC standards, creating new IPC standards is a little bit like moving a mountain. It takes a lot of people. It's a committee-based organization with lots of countries heard from, so to speak, and lots of people who have good technical expertise. They want to impart some partisan commercial stuff. You can always, in the cleaning standards, I can read the standard and I can tell you who wrote certain parts of it because I can hear their voice in the words, right? We know who they all are. But in your world, Foresight created its own standards. Mm-hmm. And again, without going too deep down the technical rabbit hole, because I'm really just illustrating a point using this example, but we have cleanliness standards that have been in our industry for 50 years. And those cleanliness standards were developed 50 years ago and were for so long obsolete. So I said earlier in my intro that I was going to write you march to the beat of your own drummer, but I realized that could be misinterpreted as a little crazy. But so I said you march in front of the band. But definitely you are kind of in many ways marching to the beat of your own drummer, because instead of just going along with the standard, you created this in-house standard of acceptable and not acceptable levels of contamination, not just in bulk, but based on specific contaminant species. You basically created this out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere for you, but out of nowhere for the industry. Yeah. All of a sudden this showed up, and it was very helpful, yet not incorporated into the standards. So, and I know that you sit on these standards committees. So you're not just sitting by waiting for the standard to catch up. You're kind of leading the charge, and maybe the standard will catch up with you, right? But how frustrating is that to be at the front of the pack, waiting for the rest of the world to catch up? And is that sometimes a challenge if someone asks you, well, where is that quoted outside of your company? So how much of your reputation and your sincerity and your research has to translate to the customer? That has to land on the customer so they can accept your numbers when an industry standard says something completely different, or at least has historically. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Well, you have to step back a little bit and remember where we came from. We had process control tools and industry standards that said these were acceptable. We qualified these processes and built on this 50-year history of the way we've always done things. But then we changed everything: materials, temperature, solder quality, solder reliability, solder alloys, fluxes, no clean versus clean. All those variables changed, and no one stepped up in the industry, trade associations, and the specs. And we kept seeing these failures. So what we did was we took the failure and said, okay, these are the root causes. They're coming from these parts of the process. We go back and optimize that process, remove those root causes, and clean up the effect. And we then qualify the new process, and then we move down and monitor that process. And that's been our whole experience. And we've collected that database of knowledge and have built DOEs around that to say, okay, here's where the limits are, and here's how they change over time. Because when we were doing early fluxes and we were having a lot of failures due to incoming bareboard cleanliness from an amine hydrochloride hassle flux that was leaving high levels of chloride or bromide, and the no clean processes were failing miserably, then we were looking at chloride. And when I first developed the localized extraction method and did electrical tests, we were focused on chloride and bromide. Well, when the weak organic acids came in and we started looking at those variables, we had to adjust because parasitic leakage was giving us intermittent performance issues as a precursor to any dendrite shorting that you could see. But if you put them into elevated humidity, they would actually fail. So it was easy for us to be able to take this technology and move it, set limits, and say, okay, the IPC didn't want to listen. Okay, that's fine. I have clients who have adopted these levels of cleanliness, including Honeywell, including some of the high reliability clients. And it's taking that technology and seeing them build on it and seeing them be successful and use that technology, which is the good feeling that I have. Seeing that the industry hasn't caught up yet from a spec standpoint, I don't know that they ever will. I don't think that they want the liability position. I don't think that they're pushing everything back and saying everything is a guideline document. You have to develop your own level of cleanliness and requirements for your application in your industry. So go figure out what that is, which means more work for us. Yeah. So yeah, if the IPC doesn't want to do it, fine. We'll help other people do it themselves.
What were some of the common misconceptions that people had, that you had? No. Let me rephrase that. What are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about owning your own business? And I'll set that up. You ever seen these memes online that says, "This is what I do. This is what my parents think I do. This is what my friends think I do," and they're all different, right?
All different.
And usually, what they actually do is far less interesting than what everyone thinks they do. So, with that in mind, your friends, maybe I call them civilians, people who aren't in this industry, that know, oh yeah, Terry, yeah, man, he owns his own business. He's his entrepreneur. What are some of their misconceptions about owning a business?
They've all agree on one thing. No one knows what I do. They've all been to my lab. They all seen the toys. They've all seen the equipment. And they go, he works on electronics, and that's as far as my wife can get that far. That's about it. But it allows me to step back and from a business standpoint, I'm probably one of the best kept secrets in Kokomo. Most people don't even know that we have a very successful worldwide business. Even the guys at GM and Delphi that I work with, very few outside of the core of people working on problems, they don't know what we do. And so it's like, okay, which is fine with me. I've got enough work. It's always good to have more work, but I have enough work. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions for me when I started the business, from a business standpoint, I had that movie version of the boss walking down the aisle corridor and people coming up, handing him things to sign, and they go off and do something and things get done. I have that problem where people constantly coming into me, sign this document, deal with this NDA, deal with this contract. And I'm just like, I wish I could just get work done. You guys keep bringing me stuff and that I from a business standpoint, that I'm like, okay, I see that it has to be done, but it takes away from the real focus of what I perceive that I'm supposed to be doing. So.
Yeah. I find my friends generally romanticize the idea of being your own boss, right? I mean, that seems to be a lot of people's goal, but there's certainly nothing romantic about it. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's an awful lot of worry. There's long hours. I remember in the early days, I would go in on Monday, come home on Wednesday. Go Monday morning, come home Wednesday night. We just pulled these all-nighters, particularly when I was writing code. I used to write all the code for our machines, and you get into coding time. It's the hands of the clock just move like this, and there's no perception of it. What advice would you give for entrepreneurs? I think between the recession and now in the pandemic, some people have found themselves at a new intersection where they need to find another job, or maybe they've had this idea that they've had in their head for a long time. And perhaps there's some people considering starting their own business, doing what you did, doing what I did, and so many others have. What would having gone through everything you've gone through, having learned everything you've learned over this 29-year journey, what would you recommend? What's some of your key advice tips to budding entrepreneurs?
Write down everything that you want to do. Put a clear business plan in place, but it doesn't have to be this great big story. It has to be a very concise, very focused bullet points of, okay, here's what my product is. Here's how I'm going to actually do the work. And here's how I'm going to market the work, and here's how I'm going to fund the work. Basically break it down into those 4 key categories, and then talk to people. Find out if people really want that service. They want that work. Do they think it's valuable to pay for? And then kind of figure out where they're willing to pay. I wish I would have done the pricing part of that early on, but I was forced to. But it becomes critical for that entrepreneur to really understand, how do you communicate what you're doing, how you do it, especially to people who are not of the technology. For me, going in, when I first started a business and tried to go into a bank and get a loan, they basically just laughed me out of the building because I couldn't explain to them in terms that they would understand that I was here to solve problems and work with manufacturers of electronic systems and do the things that we do. They just couldn't wrap their mind around it. They said, well, those guys have engineers and labs and all that stuff. There's no reason for them to want to work with you. And I said, well, I guess not. So, but yeah, I would let the entrepreneur really work through, write it down, rewrite it down, and rewrite it down until they got to that point where it was just a clean, simple sentence of what each of those bullets would need to be.
It's funny, we talked about what people think we do. If I'm on vacation, we do a boys trip every year to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And when we go down there, we started lying about our careers because one of my buddies is a banker, a stockbroker. One's a banker. one fixes coffee making equipment, and we clean circuit boards. So it's like dud. So we just have fun with people. We just make up careers. And but before we started making up careers, it's so funny. This happens so many times, and this is probably the same in your world. So what do you do for a living? Well, we make machines that clean circuit boards to remove post-reflow contamination to avoid electrochemical migration in the forms of dendritic growth and parasitic leakage and corrosion and label adhesion and coronal codes. Oh, okay. And then they'll introduce me to their friend. Oh, this is Mike. He's from California. He's into computers.
Yeah.
It just comes down to computers.
I fix computing all the time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or I didn't know boards get dirty. Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last question. I ask this to all my guests. In the world of skill and luck, knowing it probably takes a little bit of both, what do you attribute your business success to in percentages? What percentage of skill, what percentage of luck?
I would say 50-50.
That's very generous. I expected you to be a little bit more on the skill side. I think you're being cautious there.
Well, I think that if the industry hadn't made this major change, due to the Clean Air Act, there would not have been a need for what I do.
Right.
In those early days. So for me, yeah, I'm very, very happy that we made the change from ozone depleting chemicals, and we switched to cleaning and no clean and dealing with those real risk elements. But I'd say 50% was luck, just timing and but seeing the handwriting on the wall, being able to bring a technology to the industry, 50% skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't get by without the skill, and luck is always a magnifier of skill, right? So I'm happy to have both in my life as well. And I think I would give it the same odds. I think it would be 50-50 because, you got to start off with some skill and then and pray for luck or divine guidance or something. Yeah. Something that, we need the seas to part once in a while before we drown.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Early conferences, good papers, gave us that visibility. And I borrowed a buddy's car to drive to Atlanta to one of my first conferences. And it was a great 3 days, but I didn't have a car that would make it that far in those days. So it was like, okay, let's do this and let's do it right. So.
Yeah. You do what you have to do. That's that entrepreneurial spirit, right? You just do what you have to do. There's not a question of can, it's just a question of how and when, right? It's you just find a way to do it. Well, Terry, this is great. I've wanted to talk to you for a while. I've always admired your business. We work together with similar, we share a lot of customers. So it's always been good to work with you and your team. And just working with your team, I know that there's some good stuff going on there. From top, I hate to use the word top down because I'm not insinuating anyone is down, but from senior management to the people who actually do all the real work, there's some good vibes coming out of your company, and I appreciate you spending time with me today and my audience. And I don't think I need to wish you luck, but
I'll take it
because you have that. You have enough skill, but I'll throw as much luck your way as possible. Good luck in the future,
and back at you. And I appreciate the opportunity, Mike. And it's always been a great pleasure working alongside you, especially on committees, and just going in and knowing that I've got someone who has similar mindset and understanding of where we need to be and what we need to focus on as a reliability element in the industry. So thank you very much for all your support.
That sounds great. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll look forward to catching up with you at a show. Maybe we can go out and have a little stogie and a glass of something. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's been my second passion. Is we've got some friends. We've kind of formed a distillery. So working through those side of the issues, that's been another stress relief for me. Is starting another company. So it's been fun.
You would be the second, and we'll come back and talk to you if you do that. I interviewed someone from Nano Dimension. They make basically a printed circuit board printer, It literally is like an inkjet printer that prints dielectric material and conductive silver ink, and after a few thousand passes, you have a board with vias and ground planes and markings. I mean, it's amazing. It's like Star Trek. You know when they order food and the door opens and there's a meal in there. I mean, it's like that, right? But at the end of the interview, he talked about a distillery that they started called Milk and Honey, and they're in Israel. They actually are making whiskey in Israel, not known for whiskey, right?
Not a whiskey. Yeah. So that's.
But they it's called Milk and Honey. They've won a bunch of awards, and anyway, so it would be great if you could do that. If so, definitely come back on the show, and we'll talk a little bit of technical stuff and a lot of whiskey.
I love that.
Or bourbon. Yeah. All right, sounds good. Well, thank you very much, Terry. All the best to you and your family and your team, and I'll look forward to seeing you face to face
soon.
All right, take care.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Concept to Creation podcast. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, please be sure and subscribe. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and virtually wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this in the car and you would like to see the video version of this as soon as you get home, as soon as you get back to the office, be sure and search for us on our YouTube channel, the Concept to Creation YouTube channel. When you're on the YouTube channel, be sure and hit the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified of new episodes as soon as they're released. We do release new episodes on the first and third Tuesday of each month. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Living free, and I was meant to be free, meant to be free.